Now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be pleasing in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Well, over the ages, the human race has been given to reflect and think and consider the question, what is love? And I think there's been many good answers and many compelling ways to think about it, but I think the best reflection I've heard on it is the 1993 hit, What is Love, Baby Don't Hurt Me? If you were in the dance halls or disco clubs in the 90s, you would know this tune very, very well. If you watched MTV a lot like I did as a kid, sorry, Mom. I watched a lot of MTV, but this song, I'm being a little facetious, of course. You can laugh with me here. It's a ridiculous song. But the quote, what is love? And then to answer by saying, baby, don't hurt me. There's something profound there. There's something very interesting for you and I to think about. Of course, Jesus has a lot to say about love, and I think he would say a lot of what Hadaway had to say in that song. And of course, the Bible at large has a lot to say about love. And we as Christians, we think we know what love is, right? We like to think we do at least. But Jesus talks about it here in this morning in our text. And I know this is an odd text for you and I if we're in the Easter season. And Easter is a season, not just a day for us. These 50 days, we're used to seeing sort of post-resurrection accounts, right? That's what we see in Easter. But here, this is actually the night before he died. This is Maundy Thursday, if you will. And so it's interesting for us to kind of go back in time a little bit of lectionary whiplash. But he says, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. And as I reflected on that over this last week, we were sitting at Bible study actually Monday morning, and I thought, gosh, this is not a new commandment. Israel had the command from the very beginning to love God with all their heart, and with all their soul, and with all their mind, and with all their strength. And if you remember later, too, in Leviticus, it says to love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus sums those two up. He says, on the law and the prophets hang, all the law and prophets hang on these two commands. So what does he mean here when he says it's a new commandment? It should have been embedded and ingrained in them at this point. Well, he doesn't stop there. If you read the next part of this passage, he says, just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. In other words, it's not just love your neighbor as yourself, as hard as that is. Let's admit it for a second. It's pretty hard. Jesus has gone a step further. He says, no, even that won't do. The love that you see fit actually is not even good enough. Love as I have loved you. And what does that love look like? Well, here on the night before he's betrayed, he's kneeling at the feet of his disciples. He's just washed their feet when he says this. He's just washed their feet. He's got a basin of dirty brown water next to him because he's been dealing with their mess. And that act alone, I reflected on this at Maundy Thursday a few weeks ago, but it's still time to think about it. The unthinkable, that God would kneel and wash their feet. The Almighty would be washing the feet of dirty little fishermen and tax collectors and sinners. Never lose the effect of how profound that is, that the Creator of heaven and earth would sink so low to do that. That's something. But he goes on to kind of describe even more so, love one another as I have loved you, not simply in this foot washing act, but right before this, as Judas left, you see the words, Jesus says, now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. In other words, his glory is to be given over. Judas has gone to sell him out for 30 pieces of silver. And this is Jesus' great moment. For you and me, the great moment might be that 15 minutes of fame that we all like. Maybe your Facebook post got a lot of likes this week. Or maybe you finally got recognized at your company, or whatever it is for you in your life. There's a few moments in your life that really are peaks. For Jesus, his peak was being handed over to death to serve those whom he was given to serve. That's his glory. And so loving your neighbor as yourself is not enough. He's saying love even further than that, to the point of giving yourself up. Being willing to be hurt. So yes, Hadaway had a point. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. We don't like to love that way. And truth be told, when you do actually love someone and someone loves you, hurt is just part of it. Getting that close to someone with their sin and their problems too, it's just inevitable. Whether it's in romance or in parenting or family life or just friendships, we're going to sling mud, aren't we? That's just who we are as sinners. And yet Jesus' call and response here is not to sling mud back, but to take the mud from the other person. You know, I hear oftentimes, don't be a doormat. Make sure you're not a doormat. Love people, but don't do that. Well, that's not really in the gospel, is it? And I understand the sentiment there. I'm not saying stick in a relationship that's harmful to you, but what I am saying is sometimes we draw the line too quickly and say, oh, I can't take it. Jesus took it. He continues to take it. And I mentioned this a few weeks back, but one of these, pastors on Twitter, and this is the biggest mistake for a pastor to ever be on Twitter, so keep me from it. Don't let me ever get a login. I don't have one, so just so you know, keep me honest. But this pastor said, forgive others, yes, make sure you forgive, but don't let them off the hook for what they're responsible, their consequences. Make sure they feel the weight of those consequences. And I'm like, good grief, well, what is forgiveness then? What is forgiveness then? If the idea is that you forgive and not forget as well, as you often hear, that's not forgiveness at all. And truth be told, Jesus, in the midst of saying all of these words, is forgiving, is choosing actively to forget, as they say in the Old Testament. Your sins are as far as the east from the west. God remembers them no more. That's our call too. But in the midst of this, he had 12 disciples about to betray him. Yes, Judas was the chief of them, but the other 11 were run and hided too. And so in the midst of their active disobedience and their active mudslinging and their active turning their head away, acting like they didn't know him, he was saying, I forgive you, and I love you, and I give myself up for you. And so there was no more ledger keeping for Jesus. He wasn't keeping an account of rights and wrongs. I'm really good at that. I can remember the day and time of when you wronged me. I keep a little catalog in my head, so be careful. But I know you're the same way. We're all the same way. We keep little lists, don't we? And we say, well, oh, I did the dishes this week, or I took the trash out, or I did the taxes. I'm not looking at any one person in particular over here. But she knows more than anyone else that I can keep account of these things, and I openly am sorry for that. And you all should be too. But that's the way we are as humans. We keep accounts, don't we? But Jesus is not keeping an account. He's fully dropping all of that. And so the ledger is thrown out. He throws it into the fire. The ink that you're ready to put on against your neighbors doesn't work anymore. He's not counting those. So scorekeeping is done. It's done. Between your spouse, between your kids, between your parents, between your coworkers, it doesn't count anymore. And we can confess, as the great Swedish band ABBA says, I feel like I win when I lose. I feel like I win when I lose. That is the nature of the gospel, is facing your Waterloo, facing whatever it is for you and saying, I give up. I'm not here to win anymore. I'm not here to prove that I'm right. How many arguments have you had for you to justify yourself over and over and over again? That's not love. Love is saying, I'm going to take it. I'm going to lose this time. Scorekeeping is over. That's exactly what Jesus did. So this new commandment comes. It's not just simply loving with all your heart and your soul and your mind. That's great. It's not simply loving your neighbor as yourself, but it's loving as Jesus loved, laying himself down. No greater love is there than this, that a friend would lay his life down for another. And you may be quaking in your boots right now and saying, that's impossible, Jay. I can't do that. I've got a livelihood to keep up. I've got a reputation. Yes, you do. And that's why it is impossible. And that's why he did it for you. And he continues to do it for you. He continues to take the hit. His reputation on the line, not yours. And when you recognize that gift for what it is, maybe you can pass it on to someone else. Perhaps it finally clicks. And you can see the good gift of God's lavish, unmerited grace towards you. Maybe, just maybe, your cup will overfloweth unto someone else who doesn't deserve it either. Maybe they're sitting across the table from you this afternoon. Maybe they're sitting on the pew with you right now. And it's real easy to do it to a stranger sometimes, especially folks who are down and out. It's easy to write a check and send them on their way. It's hard to do it to people you live with day in and day out, in the grind. And it's those 2 or 3 or 4 people in your life where this really hits home, where the ledgers of your life actually need to be thrown out, and that love and grace and mercy can actually succeed. So this morning, receive the gift. Recognize it for what it is. This love that's not simply the Old Testament law of love, which is profound and good, and I'm not throwing that out. But actually, Jesus did come to fulfill the law. He did not abolish it, but he fulfilled it. And he gives this new command, which can only be fulfilled once you've received it from him. As John will later say in one of his letters, we love because he first loved us. It's when you see that love for what it is that you know that he did get hurt. Baby, don't hurt me was not true for Jesus. He took it, and he continues to take it. And when you see that, and when you receive it, your love actually now has context. And you actually have love that you can give. Amen.